Okay, so let's show how to create a cutting plane line using the Polyline command tool. I've expanded my command line at the bottom of my screen so you can watch what prompts are going to be provided with the Polyline, as I will input numbers for different values. So I'm going to invoke the Polyline command, and I'm just going to randomly pick a specific point. Now I'm in inches, so I'm going to provide you with two different drawings, one for an inch cutting plane line and one for a metric cutting plane line. So I'm going to start my first point, and it says that my current line width is at 0. If I am trying to create the arrowhead end of the cutting plane line, I will need to change the width of that. So you'll notice you can drop down to the bottom and select width, or any of the letters that are in blue. If I type in W and hit enter, it will ask me for a new width. So my starting width on an arrowhead should always be 0. That way it makes a point. And then the ending width, since I am in inches, I don't want it to be really any larger than normal arrowheads on dimensions. So I'm going to use 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch. And as you can see, it starts to create that thickness at the bottom. So now the length of the arrowhead is going to be about the same size, about 0.125, or if you want to make it stand out a little bit more, we can make it 0.18. So I'm dragging my cursor the direction I want, and I'm just going to specify the distance. Now you'll notice the next polyline in the sequence is going to be the same thickness as what we just ended with. So we have to again change the width. Again, I can either move down here and select it, or I can type in the first letter W. And the Polyline allows you to add these widths, and that's really good if we don't have thicknesses of our lines indicated. Since we're not using thickness, we can give it a little bit of a thicker look than just a regular center line on our drawing. So we can change this, and I'm going to use 0.03 for my starting width and 0.03 for my ending width. So you'll see that it gives me a little bit thicker line. Now the length on this needs to be comparable to how big your drawing is. So there is no set size for this. Just don't go 2 inches and try to create that. It needs to be relatively close to where your cutting plane is going to be placed on your drawing. So maybe a 1/2 inch. So I'm dragging my line, I'll do a 1/2 of an inch. And then your cutting plane line should go across your entire object. Since I don't have an object, I'm just going to do a 5-inch line roughly. Now, since I'm using exact measurements, when I come back up, I should have an arrowhead on this side since this is a full cutting plane line. So I'm going to use a 0.5 again. And now I'm ready to create that arrowhead. So I'm back to needing to change my width. My starting width needs to be the same thickness as what we use as the bottom of the arrowhead here, because now it's going to go from the larger end to the point. So I'm going to go back in and use 0.125 as my starting width and 0 as my ending width. And you will see it starts to have that point shape. And then the length of it, 0.18. Enter, and there's the cutting plane line drawn using Polyline. Now, of course, it needs to be on a layer. If you've created a layer called cutting plane, it could be a different color, but the main thing is cutting plane lines are usually a phantom line type. So we want to make sure we've loaded the phantom line type and use that with that particular line. So again, colors, your choice, whatever color you want to choose to use. And I'll make sure that we set to the cutting plane line. So that's the pattern. There's another pattern it shows in the textbook of all dashed lines, which would be your hidden line, but I have always used the phantom line pattern. So there's one in inches. And you can just draw this on a drawing just like I've done and save it as a cutting plane line. And then we can always take and copy with a base point. We'll just say we're going to use a base point, pick our objects, enter, and then I can go start another drawing. I'll just use one I've already got open, go back in and paste, and now I have my cutting plane line already drawn. So if I need to do one right down the middle, I could place it in the center of my object. Now I'm going to start one with metric. Same thing, invoke the Polyline command, find you a starting point, and you'll notice it's really large, so I'm probably going to need to zoom in quite a bit to be able to see this. So picking my starting point, again, I need to change the width. So I'm going to change the width, starting with the 0, ending width in metric is 3. The length of it is going to be approximately 4. And we're going to change the width again. This time we're going to use 0.5. Again, to give us that thickness. And I'll just make the line 50 units long. And I didn't specify my length here, so I'm going to use several of my tracking devices. I'm going to use my object snap. I'm going to use my object snap tracking. And I'm going to also make sure my dynamic and my polar tracking are on. And in order to do that, it keeps my line straight, but you'll notice I can track off of points. So you'll see the green lines, they're tracking. And once the two track into a corner, it basically gives me that perpendicular line at the same length as the other point that I tracked from on the other end of the arrowhead. So I don't have to know the distance. So I'll pick that point. Again, I have to change the width. I'm starting from the larger end this time, so 3 to 0. And then the length of it is 4. And now I have a cutting plane line in metric that I can save and use. Again, make sure it's on a layer for cutting plane line and has the phantom line pattern.